My name is Nathan Neese. I've been a member of the Bar Association since 2006, and I'll help to moderate this panel. First, I'd like to thank Sean, our president, for putting this together and all the people that have made it possible for us to come together today. Of course, the audience, without you guys out there, we'd just be up here speaking to no one like we normally do. And I'd like to thank the panelists for agreeing to be a member and share your thoughts and ideas of this important discussion. So let me start off with stating what our topic will be. There's, as was intimated earlier, there is a case that's potentially going to be filed by the Constitutional Accountability Center, which is a DC nonprofit. And what they want to address is whether or not American Samoans should have to go through the naturalization process to become citizens. So this opens up a wide array of issues concerning U.S. citizenship here in American Samoa, and then the applicability of the 14th Amendment. Specifically within the 14th Amendment, it's whether or not it's really kind of an all or nothing proposition. Now, the 14th Amendment addresses citizenship, privileges and immunity clause, and also due process, along with a couple other sections dealing with post-Civil War remedies that they had dealing with slave suffrage, responsibility of debts of the Confederacy, but those aren't as important as that first section. So our panelists today, starting from the chair closest to myself, and I apologize ahead of time for any mispronunciation of names. We have Whainu'ulele Falifatu Alalima Utu. He's been practicing law in American Samoa since 1990. He began working at the firm Alalima and Associates before beginning a 13-year career as an assistant attorney general. Since 2003, he has served as legal counsel to the Development Bank of American Samoa. He has been a chairman of the American Samoa Community College Board of Higher Education, commissioner of the 2006 American Samoa Future Political Status Study Commission, and legal counsel for the 2010 Constitutional Convention. And from 2005 to 2006, he was our ASBA president. Sitting next to him is Charlie Alelima, who is a 1979 University of Hawaii law graduate. He became a member of both the Hawaii and American Samoa Bar in 1979. He was then admitted to the Washington State Bar in 98 and the Western Samoa Bar in 92. Charlie was an assistant attorney general from 1979 to 1980 and a district court judge from 1981 to 1984. And also during that period, from 1982 to 1984, he was acting associate justice. He's currently in private practice in both here on the island and in Washington State, and is currently our delegate to the ABA, to the American Bar Association, and he's our first delegate. Sitting next to Charlie is Roy Hall. We heard his introduction earlier, so I'll try to keep it a little brief, and hopefully you all remember Roy. And sitting next to Roy is Afoa Moonga Lutu. Afoa joined the bar in 1975, and he opened up a private practice here in American Samoa at that time. From 1989 to 1992, he served as the Fono's legal counsel before running and winning a seat in the House of Representatives. After 2 terms, he served as special legal counsel to the House, and then chief legislative counsel for the Fono and the director of the Legislative Reference Bureau. In 2009, he was appointed as the executive director for the Constitutional Review Committee and served as the executive director during the 2010 Constitutional Convention. Afoa is also the chairman for the Agency for Better Living Endeavors and is currently a candidate for governor. So this will be your panel for today.
He's AG too.
Oh, and AG. So, if I could ask the panelists now, going in the same order, for just a brief statement of your positions of what we will be discussing today, for or against citizenship versus just being a national, for or against the court case by CAC, and most importantly, what do you see as the overarching broad issues in dealing with this current topic? Just make it very basic, and then from there we can get into questions. And later on in the second half of this, we will have questions. We will take questions from the audience. There's a... Oh, sorry.
Alofa, happy anniversary to our American Samoa Bar Association. I want to thank all the bar officers and members throughout the years for making our bar association what it is today. In Samoan, we say, "Amalo mfafutai le tausinyo I melelei." O po le seu ngā lupe au lumu mo le whaoseu e whapea o se tongi le seu nangatila. Whapulo le tualima. I was reciting a Samoan saying related to pigeon snaring to congratulate the bar officers and members since the bar's establishment for doing a good job. The Constitutional Accountability Center is proposing to file a lawsuit in federal court to have the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause applied to persons born in American Samoa. This approach is different from Congress granting U.S. citizenship to persons born in American Samoa. Congress has the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. Congress also has the power to make laws for the governments and administration of U.S. territories under what is referred to as the Territorial Clause or Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. This territorial clause states, quote, "The Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property of the United States," end quote. The Supreme Court has upheld the plenary nature of Congress's power to provide for the governments and administration of the territories. Congress enacted laws to grant U.S. citizenship for persons born in 4 of the 5 U.S. territories: for Puerto Rico in 1917, for the U.S. Virgin Islands in 1936, for Guam in 1950, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands in 1975. Congress has not passed a law granting U.S. citizenship for persons born in American Samoa. Presently, a person born in American Samoa is a non-citizen U.S. national. Under the Immigration and Naturalization Act, Title 8, United States Code, Section 1101, A22, and 1436, a U.S. national is either a citizen or a person who, although not a citizen of the U.S., owes permanent allegiance to the U.S. It should be noted that in February 2012, or this year, Congressman Falu Mavaenga and Ihunkin introduced H.R. 4021 to change certain provisions of the federal immigration law to benefit our American Samoan U.S. nationals by waiving certain naturalization requirements and also allow U.S. nationals to apply for U.S. citizenship directly from American Samoa, rather than having to travel to one of the 50 states and maintain residency there for 3 months before qualifying to apply to become a U.S. citizen. The proposed federal legislation does not give persons born in American Samoa U.S. citizenship when they are born, but it waives certain naturalization requirements for U.S. nationals who apply to become U.S. citizens. The issue of whether or not persons born in American Samoa should become U.S. citizens is not a new issue in the realm of public debate locally. American Samoa is an unorganized and unincorporated territory of the United States. Unorganized because Congress has not passed an organic act providing for American Samoa's civil government. Unincorporated because the U.S. Constitution does not fully apply to American Samoa, and Congress has not acted to incorporate American Samoa. In 1930, a group of U.S. legislators, better known as the Bingham Commission, came to American Samoa to discuss a possible organic act for American Samoa and the issue of U.S. citizenship for our people. Virtually all of the local chiefs who presented their views during that U.S. congressional visit in 1930 supported U.S. citizenship for American Samoans. As a result of the U.S. legislators' findings, a bill was introduced in Congress to establish an organic act for American Samoa and give persons born in American Samoa U.S. citizenship, but that measure was never enacted into law. In 1949, H.R. 4500 was introduced in Congress in another effort to establish an organic act for American Samoa and also give our people U.S. citizenship. The local Fono and traditional leaders opposed H.R. 4500 and wanted it amended to ensure protection of the Matai and communal land systems. H.R. 4500 was later withdrawn. In 2006, the issue of U.S. citizenship for persons born in American Samoa was raised in the community meetings conducted by the American Samoa Future Political Status Study Commission, especially those meetings held in Samoan communities off-island in Hawaii, California, and Washington State. I was honored to serve as one of the commissioners in that 2006 Political Status Commission, and I would also like to recognize our Deputy Executive Director, Dr. Tapa'auanga, who is present here, and our attorney for the commission, Talalei Uyangalele, or Tale Imalo Uyangalele. Based on what we learned about this issue, we recommended in our report that, quote, American Samoa not seek U.S. citizenship for its people at this time, end quote. Note the words, at this time. The Commission heard from many Samoans living both on island and off island that American Samoa should have a political status that will ensure protection of our communal land and Matai systems. There was a concern that the local laws permitting racial distinctions in terms of land ownership, chiefly title, Senate membership, etc., would be readily challenged if persons born in American Samoa became U.S. citizens. As you can recall, in the mid-1970s, a federal court in the King case decided to extend the right to a jury trial to American Samoa, despite the testimony of various witnesses that a jury system would not work here, in the absence of such a right in the American Samoa Constitution, when a U.S. citizen living in American Samoa requested this important U.S. constitutional right. The 2006 Political Status Commission also saw firsthand when we visited the U.S. territories of Guam and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, where persons born there are U.S. citizens, the significant loss of their indigenous cultures and indigenous languages compared to American Samoa. As a member of the 2006 Political Status Commission, I had expressed since 2006 that a compromise between the position of those who want U.S. citizenship to be extended to persons born in American Samoa and the position of those who did not want U.S. citizenship to be extended to persons born in American Samoa would be a position similar to what Congressman Fano Mavaenga is now pursuing, which is allowing only those persons born in American Samoa who wish to become U.S. citizens to apply for U.S. citizenship while residing here in American Samoa instead of relocating off-island. This approach will allow persons born in American Samoa who are residing here and who wish to remain non-citizen U.S. nationals
to still be non-citizen U.S. nationals. There was a similar arrangement in the CNMI. People of CNMI were generally granted U.S. citizenship under the 1975 CNMI covenant with the U.S. However, under Section 302 of the CNMI covenant, persons in the CNMI were allowed to choose whether they wish to remain U.S. nationals rather than become U.S. citizens. The legislative history of Section 302 indicates this choice was included in the covenant to meet the desires of a small number of generally older residents of the CNMI who felt that acquisition of U.S. citizenship would be contrary to their local traditions. It is important to note that the people of Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and the CNMI were granted U.S. citizenship by laws enacted by Congress and not by a federal court ruling pursuant to the Citizenship Clause of the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment. Persons born in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and Guam were also U.S. nationals when those islands initially became U.S. territories. And then many years later, they were given U.S. citizenship by acts of Congress. They were never granted U.S. citizenship by a federal court applying the Citizenship Clause of the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment. In our 2006 Political Status Commission visit to Guam, we heard some members of the Chamorro community complaining that they considered themselves second-class U.S. citizens because they were not able to vote for the U.S. president. Even if a federal court rules that persons born in American Samoa are U.S. citizens under the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment, we still would not be able to vote for the U.S. president. It would take either a U.S. constitutional amendment or the U.S. territories obtaining statehood before U.S. citizens born in the U.S. territories have the right to vote for the U.S. president. An advantage of having Congress debate and vote on the issue of U.S. citizenship for American Samoa is that our American Samoan people have an elected representative or voice in the U.S. House of Representatives. The federal courts, on the other hand, have federal judges who were appointed by U.S. presidents who we, as non-citizen U.S. nationals, did not have the right to elect. These same federal judges were confirmed by U.S. senators who we, as non-citizen U.S. nationals, did not have the right to elect. There is no certainty that H.R. 4021 will be approved by Congress or signed into law by the end of this year, given the country's or the nation's other priorities during this presidential election year. According to the Constitutional Accountability Center, Attorney Neil Ware, he and his clients have not yet decided to file this suit, and if so, when this suit will be filed. Even if they decide to file their suit next month, a federal court ruling on applying U.S. citizenship under the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment to those born in American Samoa is not likely to be issued this year. Whichever approach is pursued, our people should be given a meaningful opportunity to express their views on whether or not they want to be U.S. citizens, and I pray for God's guidance to help our people and those in the position of authority to decide wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Relay, for the introduction to in accordance with our customs, and also for the summary of the law and the status of these, the status of the citizenship section. My position will be taken to support citizenship. The issue of citizenship is crucial. It needs to be addressed at this point in time because there are some fundamental changes that are going about, both in the economy of the world and in the American system. I think that it is time. We've had 100 years where we have basically been in this limbo. Don't know who we are, don't know where we're going. It is time to start to make an assertion. Are you going to be a permanent part of the United States, or are you going to take another tack? Are you going to then move on to another status more akin to being independent? And these are both political, cultural, and economic things that we have to consider when we deal with these kind of choices that we have to make. From the political point of view, is it better for American Samoa to tie itself tightly to the United States through a citizenship and then begin to move itself in the direction of the United States to become equal with all other citizens of the United States? Or are we going to say, no, we always want to be different because of where we are, because of our economic situation? If that's the case, then let's go in the other direction, which is basically tie ourselves more closely to what's happening in Western Samoa. Move ourselves to the other side of the date line. Begin to integrate yourself with the South Pacific community, which is connected to New Zealand, Australia, and in a large extent to Asia. Now that is the economics, that's the future economic issue that you're going to have to deal with. A lot of the division in Samoa back in the 1900s came because a different political, economic situation existed at that time. And the reason why we were divided was because the powers that be at that time, Germany, Britain, and America, and the U.S., were the ones that were having their gunboats and coming around here and trying to divide up the last, basically uncolonized part of the world. 100 years later, we're in a totally different situation. So I think at this point in time, it is important that you make, that American Samoans have to make that call. Whether we are going to tie ourselves tightly to the United States, if it is, take the citizenship route. If not, take the other route. I think with respect to the situation that I see now in American Samoa, I think the American Samoans would say tie ourselves tightly to the United States. And let's get on with it. Let's start with the issue of citizenship. Let's get that citizenship and tie ourselves into the United States. The issues that are of concern that were raised by Whainui deal with how about our culture? How about the protection of our Matai system? How about the protection of our land? There are many ways in which the protection of the land and the protection of the Matai system can be dealt with. There are trust laws, laws of trusts. All you need to say is these trusts are in perpetuity and they apply to all lands in American Samoa and the trustees of the Matais elected by their families. A trust situation is not an anathema to the Constitution of the United States. It can exist, and it does exist. The only difference in the United States with respect to trusts is they have this thing called the rule against perpetuities. Okay, you've got the rule against perpetuities, but that is just a common law instrument. That's a common law concept from England. You don't have to have it. You can say Samoan Matai lands exist in perpetuity, and then you can have, then there's consistency. And how do you select your Matais? You select it through your cultural and traditional processes. You have then, so on the issue of the Matai system and the land system, I think it is more of a knee-jerk reaction that people have that somehow citizenship or somehow the application of the U.S. Constitution will somehow take that away. It won't. As long as you are faithful to that concept of a trust, Matai is trustee, all descendants of the inhabitants of Samoa are descended, from all those descendants of Samoa and connected to the Matai system have a right in that land. Where you have your problem with the Constitution of the United States is in these blood requirements. this blood requirement for ownership of land. It doesn't apply to customary land. That's under a trusteeship of the Matai. It applies to this concept that's called individual land. Individual land is really a creation of basically the courts of American Samoa. It is not a concept that Samoans have. It is a hybrid concept of, I have a piece of land. I don't want to be under a Matai. It is now, and I want to call it my individual land. It was something that was created. Now we've had to try to deal with it. First concept of individual land came up early in 1900s, basically with some traders who had married to Samoans wanted to register land just on their own, and wanted it for their children, who were afakasis. And so they said, okay. They went to somebody must have talked to them, saying, the American system had dealt with blood, and saying, we'll deal based on blood. So they had started to say you have to be 75% blood to own this new concept called individual land. That started the blood concept, not by Samoans. Samoan traditionally do not care about the amount of the blood. It as long as you have some blood and you're related to us and you can support our family, you are our family. Samoan culture and community is inclusive. It wants to bring people in. You have a blood connection. It could be way back 20, 30 generations ago. As long as you make that connection, that's what Samoans do when they sit down in family fa'alave'alaves. They come and talk about their ngafa, and they start talking, and somebody that wants to get in with a certain family comes in and sits down and says, okay, your grandmother's 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 grandmother. They go all the way down to make that connection. If the family accepts it, you're part of the clan. You have the rights of a clan member if the family accepts that. So the idea of blood requirements is not a Samoan requirement. In my estimation, that is a requirement that Americans sort of put into it, because Americans at that point in time, in that point in history, and it's a sorry history of basically trying to seek blood as being the key to a person's rights and the amount of blood. And they were very much interested in saying that you protect culture by blood. No, you protect culture by descent in Samoan culture. So what they did was they enacted a 75% requirement initially. By 1949, found out they were getting a lot of afakasis that were falling below 75%. So I think the Willises and a couple of other people, went and got the law changed. It went down to 50%. Okay, now we're not, 2 generations later. Well, guess what? We're getting lots of people here. I've got a crazy situation where one brother married a Samoan from Hawaii who'd never been down here, but his kids have more rights than another one who married a Hawaiian who all live down here and has kids that are not able to own land, even though they've been raised here, lived here, because they fell below the 50% requirement. That is the issue that is going to that's the issue that really needs to be addressed. If you can address it by saying, no, there's no blood requirement for ownership, then you can pass constitutional muster. And if the lands that you're dealing with are trust lands, there's no problem in terms of saying that passes constitutional muster. So I think in the area of saying, well, we don't want citizenship because it's going to hurt our Matai system, we don't want citizenship because it will hurt our land system, I think that is sort of a reaction that I think should not, that can be addressed and should be addressed. And so I think that citizenship should not be an impediment to gaining citizenship for Samoans. The question is, do we want to have that close tie? Citizenship, if Fainule is correct, you do need to have a constitutional amendment to say that we extend the rights of of election for the president to a territory. They did it with D.C. That's a constitutional amendment that gets D.C. involved in it. But in terms of what's the benefit for American Samoans to get the citizenship granted to them, means that if you go to the States, you can obtain residency and vote right away. At this point in time, we've got a situation where there are people in the States who used to vote absentee down here a lot. Then there were U.S. nationals, and they voted absentee. At least they had some political participation. They're no longer allowed to do that here in American Samoa, but they're not allowed to do it up there in the U.S. Now, I think in terms of the reason why they want U.S. nationals to, why they had this idea of U.S. nationality, was because they thought, and if you read the congressional record when they were dealing with granting citizenship, when they denied granting citizenship down to us down here in 1929, their main concern was you're being raised in a different environment, different culture. They didn't want to extend it to Philippines because there are Muslims over there, there are Malay people. It was very racist sometimes. But we were considered, and even the guys that supported us down here always prefaced their argument, well, they are of the Caucasian race, you know. I mean, it was really interesting to see how they tried to do this in the 1920s in that sort of Jim Crow kind of environment. But, you know, so the issue of citizenship denied back then was really more of a denial because of racism in the U.S. and not because of any lack, you know, knowledge of what or any specific action by the Samoans who actually wanted to have that closer connection back then. Apparently, motives changed. We've got now another generation which said, no, we don't want citizenship. And I think it was primarily because of that fear, which I think is unjustified, of losing their customary and cultural rights in the land. So, as I said, I think I would support gaining that citizenship. Whether it'll be done through this action that's being done up in Washington, D.C. by a federal court, possibly not, but hey, we don't know. I mean, the federal court might look at the 14th Amendment and try to expand it to include having citizenship down here. It's always worth a try. But clearly you can do it by congressional act, and perhaps that's what we should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the lesson on Samoan rights to land. My position is fairly simple. I review the insular cases as being applicable here, and for the insular cases are those cases which were decided by the United States Supreme Court after the Spanish-American War, where the United States had taken over the islands of Guam, the Philippines, and Cuba. And they were called insular cases because they were cases involving islands that the United States had come by reason of war. Now we basically owned them. And this was also extended to Hawaii when Hawaii was annexed by the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy. So all these cases by the United States Supreme Court are known as the insular cases. And those cases are applicable to American Samoa because we are an island. And what I want to say is that in the insular cases, the Supreme Court said that even if you have U.S. citizens in these insular areas, the United States Constitution does not apply to them completely. What the insular cases said that they will take a look at it, and they will, by piecemeal application, they'll look at the area, and if they determine that constitutional right is important to the citizen or the resident, the court will piecemeal grant that constitutional right to that insular area. A great example here is the King versus Morton case. You know, if we have to wait for Congress to allow jury trials in criminal cases, we still would not have jury trials in criminal cases. Now, I'm involved in a case, an admiralty case right now, where the plaintiff's counsel has filed a demand for a jury trial. This is the first time that it's ever been done in an admiralty case. In federal courts, which has, in the states, exclusive jurisdiction over admiralty matters, it is a fundamental right that every seaman receives a jury trial. It's almost when you put the title on, complaint in admiralty for injuries, and then right under that you put and demand for jury trial. Now that will raise the issue now, and if it is taken up to federal court, assuming our court denies the right of jury trial in that admiralty case, and counsel takes this case and sues the Secretary of the Interior and brings it before a federal court. Now the court, under the insular cases, can't find that we are entitled to jury trials, not just in admiralty cases, in all civil cases. And in particular, to the citizenship issue, that is another constitutional right, which I feel like if we have to wait for Congress to enact something for American Samoa, at the next 80th anniversary of the Bar Association, this subject will be back on the table. I have no problems with a federal court under the insular cases looking at to see if American Samoa at this stage should have that fundamental right of citizenship under the Constitution. Now, some talk was mentioned by my colleagues here about land. You know, I get the story. I spoke to about 25 years ago. I was talking to this high chief, and he was telling me that he owns this beautiful beachfront property, and he said, you know, Roy, I want to do something with this. I want money. I want to develop it. You know, he said that whose right is it to tell me I can't benefit myself, my family, my future generations with this property that I have? And he said, all I want is help. I need help to make sure that I make the right decision. If I need a lease, give me the best lease possible. If the land goes into maybe a trust, he said, I need help. That's the type of help I need so that I can get the value and use of the land and yet preserve it for future generations. He said that right now, I can't do anything. I've got this beautiful beach, and it's nothing. It's nothing. It's nothing to my children. It's nothing to future generations. It's just going to sit there, all because other high chiefs have decided that they want to preserve our communal land. And he said, I've got no problems with communal land, preserving it. But, you know, how about me, you know, the chief of this land? Shouldn't I receive some benefit of it? And I agreed with him. And I do. I still agree with him. And I think that it's up to us by laws to come up with a way to protect that chief and ensure that he doesn't sell this beachfront property for $100. Make sure that he gets the full value of it. Make sure there's a reversionary interest in clause in there that's saying if it's sold, the land will come back to his family, or if it's in a trust, which probably I like that idea. But there must be a way to do it. But they should be able to have the economic value of that property for themselves and for their families. Now, you know, Charlie's talking about, you know, maybe we should go west. Samoa, what's that other place? New Zealand, Australia, you know, and there's countries in Asia. Well, you know, I don't want to go there. You know, I don't like using A4 paper. You know, I don't, you know, There's lots of things I don't like. I'd rather go north and to the east, all right? And I don't want to be tightly, you know, I don't like to use the word tightly. I'd like to use the word warmly, cuddly. You know, that's a relationship I want with the United States. And that's the way it should be. And I believe that the insular cases is right on point. If this case is filed, I would like to see a federal court make a ruling on it. And as far as I'm concerned about Congress can move. They can maybe it's a horse race. Let's see who gets who wins. If Congress acts before the court case, that's good. But if the court case goes forward, and under the insular cases, the court determines that American Samoa is ready for citizenship and maybe other constitutional rights, then I say, God bless the court.
God bless America.
God bless American Samoa. You know, what I'd like to see in this relationship to move forward is that, you know, there's a third front that, you know, we can, you know, and I keep saying that we need dialogue, we need to keep talking about things. And we, you know, I listen to the governor's speeches, and lately all I've heard is that, you know, we're unincorporated, unorganized, you know, and this is our forefathers' plan. There's no such plan in my opinion, all right? I'd like to be organized. I'd like to be under an organic act. And if not, I'd like to be incorporated into the United States system through a formal document, whether it be a compact or a commonwealth. I'd like to have something, a piece of paper that we can look at and stop this undefined, unorganized, unincorporated status that we think we have, because it's worth really nothing to me. Thank you very much.
Well, do I need to say further? I want to thank my colleagues for their positions. But I'm wondering whether we are supposed to be talking in terms of the final decision makers. Because I believe that the people that should make that decision is our people. There's no problem with the courts. I mean, we're talking here as lawyers now. But if the court comes in one way or another, it has great implications and great effect on our territory. Now, my position is, even though there's a case that's going to be filed, and I agree with Council Hall, that's the chief name, about the effect of the insular cases. But I think the citizenship issue is a much more critical issue in terms of the future of this place. And I think if we have to have the courts decide it, and it does not come the way we want it, we're going to have some problems. I think it's, right now I support Council Leatao's Kalfatu's position that we should have, at this time, some convention or a gathering to decide on this political status thing. Now, there's no, my question is this: if we go through the process and the court will grant citizenship. What does that mean to those who have passed away, born here, children born outside of American Samoa? What effect does that do to their status? Do they come under as children of dead citizens of the United States? And we are at the crossroads of our political status, and we're still trying to find out where we are. We're not in, we're not out, we're hanging somewhere in between.
Another 100 years would be.
And the legal and political effects of that, and cultural effects of that, I'm very concerned about our culture. Now, I'm a Matai. I live that life, even though I'm a lawyer. I'm concerned about the people that I take care of that serve the Matai system. I love this culture. I understand that in Northern Marianas that they have some arrangement with respect to communal property. I don't believe in the trust, turning our communal lands as trust lands, because that's too shallow for me. Effect of a definition of communal property. So I'm trying to keep within my time, and I'm going to make it less than 5 minutes. And so what I say is, personally, I like the United States. And if the court decides that we become citizens through the court system, my only question is, what effect will that do to our country? That's my only hesitation right now to a position, because I'm concerned that we need to decide for ourselves, and we need to do it. We can't prolong this thing. And like Council or Chief Awali says that to depend on somebody else, the legislature, to do that. It's our people that make that decision. That I think I would call them to come, and it's up to us to forward all of these issues that are coming from the United States or from other places that affect us, to bring them before our people and make them understand. Because if you go through the process right now and all of a sudden you get this change, people will not understand. It will create a lot of chaos. So from the side of caution, that is my position. I'm very cautious.
Thank you all for your comments. We're learning about where we're supposed to be, so I can do two things. If anybody has questions, I'll open it up for questions, or I have some of my own as well. If anybody has something they'd like to start out with. Yes. I think Sean will be running around with the mic to make sure everybody can hear what the question is.
Mano, soy Maua, de Manu Loia, y ahí se fue de DC. I'm wondering, there's a simple adage that we're all familiar with. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Why do we need to become U.S. citizens when we have all the, entitlements? We're all eligible for most of the federal programs, with the exception of voting for the U.S. president. That's just my thing. Why? Why do we need to pursue it? And why now? If we've seen in history that, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 attempts were made to try to have our territory become U.S. citizens, all of those attempts have failed. So that's my thing. I teach here at the college, and just like now, I get very emotional with some of these issues because we're the ones who are influencing I don't know. Sometimes I'm confused as well, and sometimes I have students who ask me, "So where do you go from here, Mr. Messer? What do you think?" And I don't have an answer.
But yeah, I'll start the response. You say it's not broken, so don't fix it. I'll just, this might not be this analogy, but there are a lot of people in the South, who said that segregation, was right. Okay, that don't worry about it. A lot of legislation tried to change it, and it took the courts to come in and say that segregation was not right. My position here is that I don't want American Samoans to get part of the entitlements. I want American Samoans to get all the entitlements from the day that they're born till the day that they die. That's what they're entitled to.
With all due respect, that's a different circumstance or situation. And then
I have to agree with you to some extent. One of the questions I had asked Mr. Neil Ware was who's really behind this? Because I know for a fact that the U.S. nationals living here in American Samoa pretty much have the same benefits as U.S. citizens. We can vote, we can hold office, public office, we can do a lot of things. And as you stated, we get all kinds of federal grants from the federal government, just like the U.S. citizens in Guam and CNMI that we visited in 2006. So he told me that it was mainly for the U.S. nationals who are living in the stateside, who are not qualified to run for office or vote because they're not U.S. citizens. All the states in the States pretty much have a requirement that you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. And a lot of the positions in the federal government and also state government, you have to be a U.S. citizen. And there are other benefits. So I think that the benefits mainly are for the U.S. nationals who are living there in the stateside rather than here, because we pretty much have, like I said, all these benefits. Now, the concern that I have is when you have a federal court apply the U.S. Citizenship Clause, the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution to all those born in American Samoa and make everybody who's born here U.S. citizens. Here is a situation where you have an important part of the U.S. Constitution, which is the origin of, or part of the Constitution, which gives all the people that are born in the mainland United States and in the States their rights to be called citizens when they are born. And you're applying it here to American Samoa. That should be a cause for concern, because we, people who are concerned about having their communal lands and tie systems protected, should be concerned, because when you apply the U.S. Constitution Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause to, especially equal protection, to a lot of the race-based situations here, the federal courts can defer on what is discriminatory and what is not. I mean, some federal courts have said certain race-based classifications are discriminatory, and some federal courts have said, no, they're not. There's compelling state interest to justify it. But what I'm concerned about is when a federal court holds that our tie system, which is race-based, our individual land system, which is race-based, the selection of our senators, which is race-based, and some of our other laws, which is race-based, when that federal judge who really doesn't sympathize with the way of, you know, our laws are to protect our people and lands, that's when I become very concerned. Okay, and I just wanted to add something about the visit we had in Guam in 2006. Guam got an Organic Act in 1950, and they said they don't want to have an Organic Act. They thought that a lot of their rights as indigenous people were given up, and they just want to move away from an Organic Act. They want to be a Commonwealth. Now, all the territories, all the 5 U.S. territories, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, CNMI, and American Samoa, we're all unincorporated. Because once we're incorporated, we're going to become states. And of course, once we become states, we lose our Samoan land system and the tie system. So we don't want to be incorporated. And given the experience that the people, the Chamorros in Guam, that's the indigenous population, we don't want to have an Organic Act just for the sake of having an Organic Act. I was advocating mainly for something like a negotiated agreement, more towards like a Commonwealth, where we have more self-governing authority for our local people, and also have U.S. citizenship for our people, and also protective provisions for our lands and the ties. But hopefully, you know, that's something that we can work on towards the future. But as Fawaz stated, we want our people to decide what they want. If we have an issue put up in the referendum and ask them, do you want to change our political status, or what political status do you want? Do you want to remain as an unincorporated, unorganized territory? Or do you want to be a freely associated state like the Republic of Palau, the Federation of Micronesia, Federated States of Micronesia and Marshall Islands? Or do you want to be a Commonwealth like what you have in Puerto Rico and CNMI? Or do you want to be independent? I think our people should decide that issue. And once that's decided, then we know really whether we should have this thing called, you know, U.S. citizenship or not.
So we can get it clear to distinguish. The citizenship right is a right of the individual. The political status is the right of the community. Our political, so this issue of citizenship is going to be raised in federal court by any Samoan that wants to have the issue raised. So it wouldn't matter. They can, no matter what we decide down here, as you know, no, yes, no. The Samoan in LA can go take his matter to federal court and say, I demand this is individual to me. I think the question is that you're conflating the idea of citizenship, which is an individual right of a person, with the political status by which you are connected to the federal government. And this is, I think, the misunderstanding that you have. We're U.S. nationals. How did we get to be U.S. nationals? They passed the law saying you can be U.S. nationals. You get our protection. U.S. citizenship, what does it give you? What it gives you for persons down here is no real change. It doesn't change your political status, doesn't change anything. It just, but what it does give you is that you have the ability to go up to the United States, go into a state in or go to California and reside there and live there and the movement would be just like if you moved from Washington State down to California. You can then get all the rights and be determined to be a resident of the state of California for purposes of voting, for purposes of participating fully as a citizen in California. Okay, so in that particular kind of situation, citizenship, yes, down here probably doesn't mean much. Those of you that are here as U.S. citizens, do you feel any different? You're still
I have less rights.
You have less rights.
Yeah, I can't sit on, and I mean, House of Representatives. I can't sit in the Senate. I can't vote for United
You
States
can go,
President.
you can sit in the House of
Oh, the
Representatives.
House of Representatives, yeah.
You cannot sit in the Senate.
And I can't vote for president, and I can't vote for the governor.
But
For
the-
2 years until I get my citizenship here in American Samoa.
I understand that issue of 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, but there are residency requirements in the state, but they're not as strict. Okay, now maybe that issue of your voting right, that 2-year voting right, may be something that be changed. The 2-year voting right was there primarily because a lot of people that came down were contract workers, and they didn't want to give, and they were limited to a 2-year limit, so they didn't want, back in those days, in the old days, they didn't want a contract worker to get a vote because they're going to be going in 2 years. And for some reason, the court back then, it was an interesting decision saying that was a, there was a compelling state interest in having this 2-year limitation for voting. It didn't say you couldn't vote eventually, it just said 2 years was a sufficiently compelling given the circumstances then. Okay, it can change now. The photo can change that, or even a court can change that. That can come down to 30 days. I don't think anybody's really going to care too much these days. I don't think the issues of Florida, you still care for 2 years? I won't care, but I really don't care if you come down and vote, if you're under a contract.
Well, before I pass it on to the floor, I just want to say that the right to vote. There are many Western Samoans that live here. They live here all their lives. They cannot vote. There are many Filipinos. There are many Koreans and Chinese that are members of our community, and because of our laws, they cannot vote. And I'd like to give them the right to vote in a manner which allows them some form of citizenship, which is not allowed here. And I think that anything that's race-basis is wrong. And I feel that it has to be seriously looked at. Because right now I feel that, in my opinion, the political system here is geared only to the voters that can vote. They're ignoring, or my opinion, is that there's a lot of people here that are members of this community that don't have the right to express their position by voting. And those are the ones, and if it means that they have a pathway to citizenship to allow them to vote, or we should pass a law to allow permanent residents or those who have lived here for 5 years to be able to have the right to vote. I think that they should be given that opportunity and not be denied the right to vote.
Well, right now, if you want to be a citizen and you're a national, you can. Now, the people that Chief Awa was talking about from West Samoa that live here, they can't. Whether you become a citizen, you have to be born on American soil. So, how do you accomplish that? You have to, our laws, we need to change our laws. It's our laws that can be changed. Not you have to become a U.S. citizen, because the children's children of the Western Samoan can vote. Now, this one, they can apply for their children who are born outside if they become citizen, if that's what he's referring to. Yes, you can do that. But for those Western Samoans that lived here, I hear that you can make a change with that, but you were born in Western Samoa. There's no way you can do that unless your parent is a U.S. citizen or a national. No, because we don't have the authority to issue citizenships in American Samoa that's the same as the United States. Now, my fear is this. Personally, if it was me doing it myself in my own world, yes, I can, because it's my own stuff. But if you're in charge of a family that consists of not only people in American Samoa, but people outside American Samoa in the family, I'm very concerned. And that's the reason why I called for a meeting of the people in this island, because one decision of one man becoming a citizen could affect the whole political status of this island. Thank you.
Roy, it sounded like you had some opposition to what he was saying. Is that true? Would you like to address that? So you shook your head.
Well, yes, I do, and I think that this is a problem that many of the high chiefs and many of the political leaders of our country like the system as it is now, and I feel that their basic fundamental human rights, which include, in my opinion, the right to vote. If you're a resident and you meet the qualifications to vote, and there should be a method of voting to qualify, then you should vote. Your right to be heard should be expressed by voting. And I know that Ford and I disagree on this. I think we've disagreed for 38 years, but it just goes to show that we're consistent. We're two rivers that flow side by side, but into the ocean, but we never meet.
Just a grab. Okay. Just look at sorry, behind you get the microphone.
Thank you very much, moderator, and I'd like to thank the panel. Can you hear me? Oh, I came today because I thought it would be great, because I look at the panel and I mean this when I say this, that we're looking at probably the best legal minds of this generation in American Samoa. And so I thought I have to come to listen, because I will get some clarity. But after listening, I feel less clarity. And I just think that shows how immense and complex this issue is. Because U.S. citizenship could be the best thing that happens to us, or it could end up being the worst thing that happens to American Samoa. So it's a decision that needs to be made very carefully. And Fainule has explained very well how this can be the worst decision should the equal opportunity clauses of the U.S. Constitution be applied in full to our land system and our Matai system. I would like to ask the Bar Association to consider what High Chief Afoa has raised, and that's to figure out a way to make sure that the people of American Samoa have a say in this citizenship issue, that the courts do not suddenly decide by themselves without some substantial consultation with the people of American Samoa. I don't agree with what Roy said, that the courts will move faster than Congress. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it seems to me there's a possibility they could decide by themselves should this case move forward. Fainulele was in the Political Status Commission, where we heard from Samoan communities on island and off island. And the most important issue that was raised over and over again was the protection of land and titles. That is more important than U.S. citizenship. And if all U.S. citizenship gives us is the chance to travel easily to the U.S. so we can vote, then it will probably not be worth the risk of the damage it can bring to our lands and titles. I was impressed with Roy Hall's presentation and the vision that he brought forth, that we need a federal court, we need customs and immigration under the U.S. citizenship, that we should be organized and incorporated, and that we should protect the best of our communal land system. And if I understood, Mr. Hall, that this could probably all be put in an organic act. The only problem is an organic act is passed by Congress, and the next Congress can change their mind. just something we all need to be aware of. I don't know Charlie's Matai title, but if it's okay, I'll refer to you as Charlie. No, Fiona Leato. You described the. Did I do that wrong?
Susuma.
Wait, yeah.
I'm the only one that's Mr. Hall.
You described this thing about the concern about land as a reaction, and I want to put that together with Roy Hall's belief that nothing should be race-based, and I agree with that. But when you have a history of racial injustice that happened in the United States, not to mention around the world, with the Native Americans who lost much of their land, like the Hawaiians who are still arguing about whether a trust land system is the best thing for them. When you have a more modern example of Guam, who have lost a third of their lands to the US military, and they end up losing more when Okinawa closes, then I think you have to say that this concern about losing your lands is a very real one. And I heard the panel disagree on whether trust was the right way to go. So unless you can guarantee a way that if we gain U.S. citizenship but our lands will be protected, then it's going to be hard for a lot of people to accept. I happen to think that we are at risk as it is, that our land system is not protected in the way it should be protected. But what will U.S. citizenship bring? I'm not sure I can say. Finally, thank you for this time. There were a group of men who some people would describe as illiterate, Samoan Matai, who barely spoke English, who felt that our lands and titles should be protected. When the geopolitical mess that happened that divided two Samoas, those old men, our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, and I should say great-grandmothers, felt very strongly that this is the way we should go. And I think that's a kind of wisdom that we should not forget about as we try to move forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond on the issue of saying, well, we need to have this done as a political convention, or do it carefully. You're right. This should be done carefully, the issue of political status and citizenship. But it's been 100 years, and obviously there's somebody that's got some pretty high-powered lawyers up there in Washington who are going to try to raise the issue on behalf of the individual. This is an individual that is coming, that will be brought before us. Individual Samoan will be brought before the court and say, I am entitled under the 14th Amendment to citizenship because of my birth here in American Samoa. The court is not going to look at the geopolitical, it might look at all the other geopolitical things, but what the court is going to be looking at is this Samoan born on U.S. flag territory, and say, is this Samoan's situation such that he is entitled to citizenship? That one decision is going to affect everybody else, because once the court makes that decision, that's it. It's now a precedent. If that precedent goes all the way to the Supreme Court says, yep, that's right, he's entitled to it. Because citizenship is an individual right. It's not a collective right. Now, the question is, what's that impact going to be on our political status and our collective rights as a group? That's something we're going to have to work with. But the decision that's going to be made by the court in this case will be that one issue. So it's something that we're not going to be able to affect.
I think we need more microphones up here.
I'm glad we have only one. I think we can talk to over each other.
Well, we're not part of the United States. So that's one of the elements of the definition of citizen. But it's very, I want to thank you, Tabao, for the comment, because it's important. During the exchange we had, I just lost my thought that I wanted to say to the audience. So I'll just pass it on to, if I know maybe I'll recover and I'll say it.
I think one of the difficult issues that the court's going to be faced with, if it's filed, is to determine when or what time the citizenship should be applied. Whether it's 1900 when the deed of cession for Tutuila and Nauru was signed by our chiefs, whether it was 1904 for the Manuba people, and whether it was going to be 1929 when those deeds were ratified by the U.S. Congress. But if I was a judge, I would just say, hey, there's a process. There's already a process, a naturalization process. The people of American Samoa Congress has not decided to give U.S. citizenship to themselves. So there is already a process. If you want to become a U.S. citizen, for those U.S. nationals who are living in American Samoa, you can relocate to one of the 5 states, stay there for a couple of months. Yeah, one of the 50 states, stay there for a couple of months, then you're eligible to apply. If you're in the state side, okay, you can apply from there. What Eddie has done, Congressman Fanamamae has done, is try to amend the current statute to allow a waiver of these naturalization requirements, so that people here can be U.S. citizens without having to move to the states. And I asked Neil Ware, the attorney for the Constitutional Accountability Center, would it satisfy you and your client if you guys get the congressman to agree to amend the bill and add not only the U.S. nationals who are living here in American Samoa, but also the U.S. nationals who are living in the 50 states and other U.S. territories. And he hasn't really given an answer. He said that sounds like something that they can look into, but there's already a process of becoming a U.S. citizen. The U.S. government is not denying our people the right to naturalize citizens. And just like I pointed out, in the history of these territories, all the other 4 territories, especially Puerto Rico, Guam, and U.S. Virgin Islands, when they were taken up by the U.S. as territories, they were not citizens. The Supreme Court did not say, people of those territories were U.S. citizens. They were designated by Congress as U.S. nationals and the U.S. government, and then later on, Congress enacted these laws which made persons born in those territories, after many years of becoming territories, U.S. citizens. Now, there was case law that Mr. Ware gave me of the U.S. Supreme Court saying that people born in the U.S. territories in the 1800s were U.S. citizens. But then I asked him, am I right that after 1900, especially when the U.S. expanded overseas, because all the territories before 1900 were in the continental U.S., but after the U.S. expanded overseas, I can bet you there is no U.S. Supreme Court or federal court case that said those people who were born there in those overseas territories were U.S. citizens. And he agreed. There's no federal court, no U.S. Supreme Court case that said that. So those people are not, whether it's not really us. It's the U.S. government that said we're not U.S. citizens. So let's not, beat ourselves and say, we should try to become U.S. citizens when the U.S. Congress and them never told us that we were U.S. citizens, in the first place.
I think ultimately the question is why didn't these other why when they expanded over to and acquired these other territories, they didn't give them citizenship like they gave when they conquered the Mexican lands in California and other places. Why wasn't it automatically given? And when you read the congressional acts that they're talking about, it's absolutely clear why they had this problem. It was a very racist problem. It was a racist problem from the time, and you just read it, it's just bald-faced. There's one representative from Oregon in 1929. While he's right facing the Filipino delegate from Congress, he says, yeah, we want to get all these Filipinos out of here. That's why we don't want to give them citizenship or give them an organic act. That's the, Now the question is, I don't know if anybody's, you worry about this, but the question is, that's right, they didn't expand it to these new conquests of the U.S. The question is, why not, and should they not? Why should they not? They took it, they did it when they got lands from Mexico. They did it when they got lands from, they were given it when they got lands from France, when they had the Louisiana Purchase. What was this difference? And I think we know the difference, and now that's the issue. It's probably going to become a little bit court.
Gentlemen, right here, you have a question. I think there's a mic behind you.
I just have a simple question. Is there a distinction, is there such a thing in law or the Constitution of an American Samoan?
There's a there's a local statute that defines what an American Samoan is under the immigration title.
It's for
ACA, American Samoan.
Is that relevant to any of this conversation? A local definition of an American Samoan?
The citizenship, U.S. citizenship is a congressional and federal concept. It's not, we cannot legislate, our fellow cannot legislate us to become U.S. citizens. Only the U.S. Congress and the federal government.
American Samoa is a local term.
But
U.S.
between
nationals.
U.S. citizenships, can there be distinctions locally, or that would wipe out the idea of what an American Samoan is as defined by local statute?
You can be a U.S. citizen and be an American Samoan, but you cannot be an American Samoan and be a U.S. citizen or U.S. national or U.S. citizen, because they're two different entities. This territorial, American Samoa is a territorial term, and U.S. national, United States citizens is U.S.
The definition of a U.S. national basically is a U.S. citizen is a U.S. national. A U.S. national is not a U.S. citizen.
I think the issue that you're talking about is if you had in states, each state is sovereign, and it's given up some sovereignty to the United States federal government. So you are a citizen of the state that you're in once you become a resident, but you're also then a citizen of the United States. When you create an organic act, it creates an entity that has some sort of sovereignty over the territory that it's dealt with in relationship with the United States government. That's what those organic acts are. Those are those acts of statehood and all those other things that you're talking about. We've never had that relationship set up that you could say we have something recognized legally as American Samoa as an entity for which citizenship can be given.
But in the Constitutional Review Committee work of the last recent one or further ones, wasn't there attempts to create a more narrow definition of an American Samoan, someone who could trace their mapa back to a certain year, and so isn't that relevant?
That's for certain benefits that you get, like ownership of land, like voting, like other things like that within our local government. But it's not, it doesn't create a category, a
sovereign for the Americans.
I think there was an attempt in the U.S., the 2010 Constitutional Convention. One of the delegates suggested that you add an additional criteria for a person who's running for office, like in the U.S. The local House of Representatives, to sort of prevent others who are non-Samoans to become candidates. But another potential issue that I think the difficulty that the federal court would have is like right now in the U.S., persons who are born from illegal immigrants who are in the United States illegally, the Supreme Court has not really decided whether those guys or people are U.S. citizens. Now, I can just see, a situation where the court's going to be asked, okay, well, look at this U.S. national American Samoa. Look at their parents. Look at their parents, whether they were here legally or not legally. Then you get into all the kinds of issues, I don't think the federal court's going to be able to, have a very smooth, good decision on this type of issue. It's going to be a pretty difficult one to handle.
All right, we're about out of time, so I'll let you guys discuss the microphone one more time.
All right. Okay, I don't want some people here to leave and say that, I'm only for an organic act and I'm going to leave it up to Congress. But my statement is basically that we need to be under an organic act or a commonwealth or a compact of association. And those three types of systems require input, involvement from the community. But my position is, I want that community to include not just Samoans, not just high chiefs, not just politicians. I want it to include the Western Samoans. I want it to include the Filipinos. I want it to include Chinese, anyone that's a resident here and would qualify for citizenship. That's what I'm saying. It has to be the entire community. And that's what we do when we go. We have a congressman. He can help us draft up that legal document, which will protect it, the interests that we're all concerned about, and also give the basic constitutional rights to those others who are members of our community.
My final thoughts. We're getting closer here. The interests here advocated by and Samoa and Suma Leatoa, to me they're personal interests, but they affect community interests. Because if all of them become U.S. citizens, there's going to be big change here. So what I think is we need to come together soon to tackle those problems. If we can tackle those problems, then we can live with ourselves. But you always have the privilege and the right. If you're a national and you want to be a citizen, you can be a citizen. There's nothing stopping you. You can do that by going there, and there's a bill now that I don't know whether Congressman Palomena submitted the bill that would allow you living in American Samoa to become a citizen if you want. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. The point that I'm making about the citizenship is that, as I said, it's personal. And it's going to happen one way or the other. The issue of our political status, that can be decided anyway. I mean, if this voluntary, this waiver of requirements for citizenship for American Samoa is a voluntary act, and let's say 50% of the Samoans here get U.S. citizenship, what does it really change then? It doesn't change anything. You still have your Matai's and your lands and other things. So I think the fact that both Afua and Fanule are saying, yeah, everybody can go get their citizenship voluntarily, kind of proves the point. It's separated from your political status. So whatever the law, the judge rules up there in the federal court, whether this guy gets it as a matter of right or whether it's a matter of voluntary by congressional act, it doesn't really affect the political status that we have in our relationship to the United States. Thank you.
I just want to close with informing our audience of the American Samoa Future Political Status Study Commission's main recommendation. And that was that we shall continue as an unorganized and unincorporated territory, and that a process of negotiation with the U.S. Congress for a more permanent political status be initiated. And of course, U.S. Interior, or Department of Interior. This is important because one of the things that that the CAC has raised is that the certain U.S. territories, for instance, CNMI, federal courts have held that their protective provisions relating to their land is not a violation of the U.S. Constitution because the Equal Protection Clause that applies to that U.S. territory does not apply in full force like it applies in the mainland United States. Even their the one man, one vote U.S. constitutional principle, it does not necessarily apply in the same way that it does in CNMI. But in the CNMI situation, that was a negotiated agreement between the people of CNMI and the U.S. Congress. Now, one can allege that the deeds of cession was a negotiated agreement between American Samoa's chiefly representatives and the U.S., but I would have to say no. When you go back to the history of how we became a U.S. territory, you look at the 1889 Berlin Treaty, you have the great powers at that time of Great Britain, Germany, and the United States of America deciding by themselves without any Samoans, chiefs, kings, or paramount chiefs present, that they were going to give up their claims to certain parts of Samoa, you know, and so forth. And the question is, what claims? What claims did they have? Who gave them the right to say, you know, they had claims to our lands and to our properties? I guess they gave it to themselves. And then in 1899, in the tripartite convention that was signed in Washington in December of 1899, you got the Secretary of the U.S. or the Secretary of State of the U.S., the Ambassador of Great Britain to the U.S., the Ambassador of Germany to the U.S., these representatives of those nations signing a tripartite convention saying they were going to divide up the Samoas in this manner. And then before our chiefs signed in April 17th of 1900, the deed of cession for Tutuila, you have the President of the United States, McKinley, issuing an executive order already saying that the Tutuila Island is now under the control of the United States Department of Navy. And then the naval representative, Tilley, going to the Tui Manua and saying, whether you like it or not, Manua Islands is also under the U.S. Now, what kind of negotiated agreement is that? I don't think that was a negotiated agreement. I think we need to have a negotiated agreement. Besides, those deeds, they were so minor, according to the Congress and to the President, that they were not ratified until 29 years later. So I think we need a meaningful negotiated agreement between our people, American Samoa, and the U.S. Congress that would give protections to our lands, to our Matai system, give us that U.S. citizenship if that's what we want. That's what I think we should be heading. I think that would help protect our land and our lands and our Matai system, and it would be a much stronger, solid foundation than the unorganized status that we have at this time. Thank you.
All right. As you can see, we can probably talk for days on this. So I want to thank the panel, and I want to thank the audience for participating. It was a very strong session. So thank you, guys.
So thank you, everyone, for coming out. 40 years of promoting justice. It's been a lofty 40 years. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and we just hope that in the next 40 years, we can do the same. Thank you.